A stranger claimed that I was his long-lost sister, and my family was divided over it. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and until a few months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. That changed when I got a Facebook message from someone named Olivia, a 29-year-old woman who claimed we were long-lost sisters. At first, I thought it was one of those weird scams, you know, the ones where someone promises a fortune or claims to have shocking family secrets, but Olivia didn't ask for money or seemed sketchy. Instead, she wrote about memories of a younger sister who was taken from her family years ago. I didn't take it seriously at first. It sounded crazy, who gets kidnapped and grows up never knowing, but the details she included were specific. She mentioned a time frame that lined up eerily with my early childhood and claimed she had spent years trying to track me down. What really got me, though, was a picture she attached, a photo of her with a woman she said was our mom. The woman in the picture looked familiar, the kind of familiar that makes your stomach drop, even though you can't figure out why. I showed the message to my boyfriend, who immediately said we should look into it. I laughed it off, saying it was clearly fake, but something about the picture stuck in my head. When I brought it up to my parents later that evening, their reactions were odd. My dad barely looked up from the TV, mumbling something about don't believe everything on the internet. My mom, though, got this tight look on her face and quickly changed the subject. It felt off, but I didn't press them. I figured they were just annoyed I was wasting time on some random message. That night, lying in bed, I started thinking about my childhood. I realized there were a lot of gaps in what I remembered. For one, I'd never seen any baby pictures of myself. Whenever I asked about it growing up, my mom would just wave it off, saying they weren't organized back then, and that most of the pictures got lost during a move. I'd believed her, why wouldn't I? But now, thinking about it, it felt strange. Who doesn't have any baby pictures? The next day, Olivia messaged me again. This time, she sent more photos, including one of herself as a toddler. She looked just like I did in my old childhood photos, or at least the ones from when I was around 3 or 4 years old. She also told me about a few specific things from her childhood, like how she used to sleep with a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Floppy that she'd lost the day I disappeared. Something about the way she wrote felt genuine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't lying. My boyfriend suggested I take a DNA test to see if there was any truth to her claims. When I mentioned it to my parents, they both dismissed the idea. My mom called it a waste of time, and my dad just muttered something about not stirring up drama. Their reactions made me more suspicious than ever. Why were they so against something as harmless as a DNA test? That's when I started digging. I pulled out my birth certificate, something I hadn't looked at since I applied for my first job. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but then I noticed something weird. The certificate had been issued years after I was supposedly born. I Googled it, and apparently that can happen in adoption cases or under unusual circumstances. It was enough to make my heart race. Over the next few days, I started asking questions. When I casually mentioned my birth to an aunt at a family gathering, she gave me a strange look and said, "Well, you know your parents had a tough time back then." When I pressed her for details, she got flustered and changed the subject. Another relative told me I'd been a blessing during a rough time, but when I asked what that meant, they shrugged and said they didn't remember. At this point, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. I decided to meet Olivia. We picked a neutral place, a coffee shop, and when I walked in, it was like looking in a mirror. We had the same eyes, the same nose, even the same way of laughing nervously when we sat down. She told me about her life growing up, how her mom had always talked about the little sister they lost. Her story was detailed, down to the kinds of games they used to play before I supposedly disappeared. After that meeting, I went straight to my parents. I didn't accuse them of anything. I just asked questions. They doubled down, insisting Olivia was manipulating me and trying to cause trouble. My mom even teared up, saying I didn't understand how much they loved me. It didn't feel like an answer, though. It felt like deflection. That night, I ordered a DNA kit online. I didn't tell anyone, not even my boyfriend. It felt like the only way to get real answers. While I waited for the results, I spoke to a close aunt who'd always been a little more honest than the rest of the family. She didn't give me much, but she did say, "There's a lot about your early years that's complicated." She wouldn't elaborate, no matter how much I pushed. A few weeks later, the DNA results arrived. My heart was pounding as I opened them. Right at the top, it said I had a 50% DNA match with Olivia. We were half-sisters. Everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down in that moment. Update 1, after the DNA results confirmed that Olivia and I were half-sisters, I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The first thing I did was bring the results to my parents. I printed them out and put them on the kitchen table while they were both sitting there. My mom glanced at the paper and her face went pale. My dad grabbed it, read through quickly, and immediately started shaking his head. I didn't accuse anyone or demand anything right away. I just asked them to explain. My mom looked like she was on the verge of tears, but my dad's response was explosive. He accused Olivia of being a liar and a troublemaker who was trying to tear our family apart. He said DNA tests aren't always reliable, and that I was putting my faith in strangers on the internet instead of my own family. That's when my mom finally broke. Through tears, she admitted she had an affair years ago. She said my dad knew about it, but they had worked through it and decided to raise me together as if nothing had happened. She was adamant that I was their child and that the idea of a kidnapping was absurd. My dad looked furious at her or me. I couldn't tell. He accused me of being ungrateful and said I was falling for Olivia's manipulations. I left the house that day more confused than ever. Olivia and I talked on the phone that evening, and she told me her side again. According to her, their mother, our biological mother, was coerced into giving me up due to financial struggles. Olivia claimed their family was going through a tough time, and someone offered to help by taking me in. She didn't know all the details, but she was sure her mom never agreed to give me up permanently. I decided to share the DNA results with a few close family members, hoping someone might shed light on what was going on. Reactions were mixed. An uncle admitted he had known about my mom's affair, but claimed he didn't know anything about an adoption or kidnapping. Others were skeptical of the DNA test and sided with my parents, saying I was being influenced by Olivia and her stories. That night, I dug through old family documents stored in a box in the attic. There were photo albums, legal papers, and random keepsakes. I realized there were no medical records from my birth or early childhood, nothing before I was about 3 years old. Even my birth certificate, which I'd already found odd, didn't match the timeline my parents had always told me. A week later, I received a letter from Olivia's biological mother. It was handwritten, emotional, and full of apologies. She said she had spent years wondering what happened to me and had tried to reconnect, but was always met with closed doors. She didn't provide hard evidence, just memories and feelings, but her words felt genuine. She said she wanted to meet me whenever I was ready. Things at home became tense. My older sister called me selfish for stirring the pot and warned me not to ruin our family. My younger brother, on the other hand, was curious. He started asking our parents questions, which only seemed to make things worse. My mom became increasingly withdrawn, while my dad was more defensive than ever. At one point, he told me if I kept pushing, I would destroy our family. The underlying threat was clear: stop now or risk being disowned. I couldn't let it go though. I arranged to meet Olivia's biological mother in person. The meeting was emotional and overwhelming. She cried as soon as she saw me and hugged me tightly, but the details she shared were still vague. She claimed a family friend had helped arrange for me to go to a better home, but didn't elaborate on how it all happened. Without concrete proof, I didn't know what to believe. When I got home, my boyfriend suggested hiring a private investigator. He thought they might be able to dig up records or find witnesses to confirm what really happened. I mentioned it to my dad in passing, and his reaction was immediate. He mocked the idea and said I was wasting my time and money. His response felt more like fear than anger, which only fueled my suspicion. I started leaning on my friends for support. They encouraged me to keep digging and not give up, but I felt increasingly isolated from my family. My parents' avoidance, my sister's hostility, and my brother's quiet questioning made it clear that our family dynamic was crumbling under the weight of the secret. The final straw came when I found an old document buried in the box of family papers. It was a legal notice about a name change when I was 2 years old. My current name wasn't my original name. I didn't recognize the original name, but it matched the name Olivia's mom said they had given me. That discovery made everything feel real. I started seriously considering whether I needed to step away from my parents and focus on finding the truth. If they couldn't or wouldn't tell me what happened, I'd have to find out myself, even if it meant walking away from the only family I'd ever known. Update 2. After finding the legal notice about my name change, I hired a private investigator. It wasn't an easy decision, but I had no other way to get answers. The investigator moved quickly and uncovered something shocking. There were no hospital records of my birth in the town listed on my birth certificate. In fact, there were no records of me anywhere until I was about 2 years old. When I brought this up to my parents, my dad exploded. He accused me of being ungrateful, of tearing the family apart over some stranger's lies. He said I was choosing random people on the internet over my own parents. My mom stayed silent, her hands trembling as she stared at the floor. My dad's reaction felt more defensive than angry, like he was trying to cover something up. I left without saying much, determined to keep digging. Meanwhile, Olivia kept sending me more photos from her childhood. One of them stopped me in my tracks. It was a picture of a little girl, around 2 years old, playing in a backyard. The girl looked exactly like me at that age. The same chubby cheeks, the same curly hair. She even had a faint scar above her eyebrow, just like the one I have. It was impossible to deny the resemblance. Olivia also told me that her mother had reported a missing child around the time I was supposedly born. She sent me an old newspaper clipping about a local woman's desperate search for her daughter. The details matched everything Olivia had told me so far. My biological mother hadn't just given me up. She had tried to find me for years. Around this time, an estranged aunt reached out to me. She'd been distant from the family for most of my life, but she said she had heard about what was going on. She told me that one day out of nowhere, my parents had come home with a toddler, me, no explanation, no announcement of an adoption, nothing. She said it always seemed strange, but she had never questioned it because my parents were so secretive about everything. The family dynamic at home was crumbling. My older sister stopped speaking to me entirely. She called me selfish for digging up the past and said I was ruining our parents' lives. My younger brother, however, began asking questions of his own. He cornered our mom one evening, demanding to know the truth. My dad walked in, overheard, and lashed out. The house was tense and chaotic and I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. The extended family was divided. Some people believed me and thought my parents were hiding something. Others were firmly on my parents' side, saying I was being manipulated and needed to drop it. A few relatives even stopped talking to me altogether. The tension came to a head during a family gathering when someone brought up the DNA results. Voices were raised, accusations flew, and it ended with me walking out after my dad shouted that I wasn't welcome if I couldn't let it go. In the middle of all this, my mom finally opened up, quietly, privately. She admitted that she had been pressured into going along with everything by my dad. She said she didn't know the full details but claimed it was all done out of love and a desire to give me a better life. Her words didn't make much sense, but it was clear she felt trapped. She begged me not to push any further, but I couldn't promise her that. Olivia's biological mother decided to take legal action to access sealed adoption records. It was a long shot, but it was the only way to get official confirmation of what had happened. While we waited for updates, Olivia and I grew closer. She told me more about our family, about the things they did to try to find me, and about how much they had always missed me. At home, things got worse. My dad started pulling away, avoiding me entirely. My mom seemed like she wanted to say more but was too afraid to. The investigator found more evidence, documents showing my name had been legally changed when I was 2 years old. There were no prior records of me under that name or any other. It was like I hadn't existed before then. I decided to cut contact with my parents temporarily. I couldn't keep living under their roof, surrounded by half-truths and tension. I moved in with a friend and focused on gathering as much information as I could. It was a painful decision, but it felt like the only way to move forward. With Olivia and her mother's help, we began piecing together a timeline. Everything pointed to the same conclusion: I hadn't been born into my family, I had been taken. The truth was finally starting to emerge, but it felt like the beginning of an even bigger battle. Update 3, oh yeah, the adoption records were finally unsealed and they confirmed what I had feared all along. I had been adopted under highly unusual circumstances. The documents didn't match the story my parents had told me growing up. There was no mention of an official agency or formal adoption process. Instead, there was vague language about a private arrangement that raised more questions than answers. When I confronted my parents with this new information, things escalated quickly. My father denied everything, claiming he didn't know anything about the adoption. He tried to shift the blame entirely onto my mom, insisting it had been her decision and he had just gone along with it. My mom looked defeated, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't argue. Olivia's biological mother provided more evidence to support her side of the story. She showed me letters she had written to the adoption agency after I was taken. The letters were heartbreaking, desperate pleas for updates on her daughter. She described the guilt she carried, how she was told I would be better off, but later realized she had been manipulated. She had tried to reverse the decision, but by then it was too late. The agency had closed and she was told there was no way to locate me. I tried to talk to my parents again, but it turned into a full-blown argument. My father accused me of betraying the family and stirring up drama for no reason. My mother stayed silent, barely meeting my eyes. By the end of the night, I packed my things and moved out permanently. There was no going back. The fallout with my extended family was immediate. Some relatives accused me of ruining the family's reputation. They said I should have left the past alone instead of airing dirty laundry. Others stopped talking to me entirely. It felt like a campaign to isolate me, to make me give up on finding the truth, but I couldn't stop now. In the middle of all this, Olivia's mother shared another piece of the puzzle, hospital records showing that she had been hospitalized around the time I was taken. She had suffered complications from childbirth and was vulnerable when the adoption was arranged. The timing lined up perfectly with the gaps in my own story. It was another confirmation that I had been taken under questionable circumstances. Olivia's biological father also reached out during this time. He wanted to meet me. This added a whole new layer of complexity. I didn't know how to feel about it, but I agreed to keep the door open for a future meeting. For now, I focused on Olivia and her mother, slowly building a sense of connection with them. They welcomed me warmly, sharing stories about the family and showing me pictures of holidays, milestones, and everyday moments I had missed. Back at home, my parents tried to spin the story. They started telling people that the adoption had been done out of love and that they had only wanted to give me a better life. It didn't explain the secrecy or the lies, but it was clear they were trying to salvage their image. My mom even reached out to me privately, asking me to stop talking about it and claiming it would destroy our family. I told her I couldn't promise that. My younger brother, who had been asking more questions, decided to take a DNA test himself. The results confirmed that he was my half-sibling. It was another blow to the story my parents had been clinging to. He confronted them about it, which only deepened the rift in our family. My older sister doubled down on her stance, calling me selfish and refusing to believe any of the evidence. Olivia's mother provided another key piece of evidence, a copy of my original birth certificate. It listed a name I didn't recognize, the name she and her husband had given me at birth. Seeing it in writing made everything feel more real. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was documented proof of who I had been before I was taken. Around this time, I discovered something else that shook me. The private investigator found discrepancies in my parents' financial records from around the time of the adoption. There were large, unexplained deposits that coincided with when I was brought into their home. It raised the possibility that money had exchanged hands as part of the arrangement. I couldn't prove it yet, but it added to the growing sense that my adoption hadn't been as innocent as my parents claimed. A family friend came forward with more troubling information. They remembered my parents acting strangely around the time of my adoption, avoiding questions, cutting off certain relationships, and behaving